The middle class used to be the bedrock of modern society. A stabilizing force, a buffer against crisis, a sign that prosperity was shared, not concentrated. For decades, it grew. It expanded. It defined what progress felt like. But then, something changed. Today, in the United States and across Europe, the middle class is shrinking. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, the way most systems collapse. This isn't a political story. It's not an emotional one. It is structural. It's the anatomy of a collapse that nobody voted for, but everyone feels. For most of modern history, stability was the default. From the 1950s to the early 1980s, the middle class in advanced economies had three defining advantages: wages that rose with productivity, housing that was affordable, and essential services that cost little compared to income. A single salary could support a home, to children, a car, healthcare, vacations, and long-term savings. Stability wasn't a luxury. It was the baseline. Household security was like an asset class. You worked, you saved, you built. Progress moved in a straight line, but straight lines rarely last. The first fracture came when wages stopped moving. In the early 1980s, productivity kept rising, but wages did not. For the first time in modern economic history, workers produced more, companies earned more, but households received less. Productivity went up. Corporate margins went up. Middle-class income stayed flat. It was a slow divergence, too small to see year by year, but enormous across a generation. This was the first structural crack. The second fracture was housing. A home used to cost 2 to 3 times your annual income. Today, in many American and European cities, it's 6, 8, even 12 times that. Why? Because housing stopped being shelter. It became a financial product. Global capital flooded local markets. Zoning restricted supply. Investors bought entire neighborhoods. Land appreciated faster than wages. The middle class went from owners to renters, from building wealth to paying someone else's mortgage. Housing became the gravitational force pulling the middle class downward. The third fracture was the rising cost of necessities: healthcare, education, childcare, insurance. These aren't optional luxuries. They are foundational. When the cost of participating in society grows faster than your wages, the middle class doesn't just shrink, it erodes. It's like a slow leak in household stability. Invisible at first, but obvious later. A middle class can survive stagnation. What it cannot survive is fragility, the condition where a single unexpected bill destroys months of stability. A transmission failure becomes a crisis. A medical bill becomes debt. A rent increase becomes displacement. A broken appliance becomes a financial burden. The middle class didn't collapse all at once. It collapsed through millions of microcrises. Each one was survivable on its own. But together, they were structural. The fourth fracture came from work itself. Long-term, stable employment once defined the middle class. But work changed. Manufacturing left. Automation replaced routine tasks. Contract jobs replaced salaries. Benefits became optional. Security evaporated. The structure of work shifted from stability to efficiency, and efficient systems rarely protect the people inside them. Next, savings collapsed. Households used to save 8 to 12% of their income. Today, many save between 0 and 3% because there's nothing left to save. Housing is higher. Food is higher. Energy is higher. Insurance is higher. Debt is higher, and wages are flat. When essentials consume everything, savings disappear. Without savings, the defining feature of the middle class disappears with it: forward momentum. Debt became the substitute. Credit cards, student loans, auto loans. Buy now, pay later. Long mortgages on small homes. Debt became the silent partner of the economy, the invisible mechanism keeping consumption alive. But debt is not income. Debt is borrowed time, and borrowed time eventually runs out. A generational divide emerged. Older generations entered economies with cheap housing, affordable education, stable wages, and secure jobs. Younger generations are entering economies where those things barely exist. The middle class didn't just shrink, it split. One of the clearest signs of this erosion is that the economy grew. Productivity grew. Corporate profits grew. But household wages did not. For more than 30 years, median wages in developed economies moved sideways while the cost of living accelerated. Sometimes the proof is almost unbelievable. A European automotive CEO once admitted publicly that most of his own workers could no longer afford the cars they build. Decades ago, employees drove home in the very models they assembled. Today, many cannot afford even the cheapest alternatives. This pattern repeats everywhere. Workers who make refrigerators can't afford new refrigerators. Employees folding clothes in major retailers can't afford the clothing they sell. Hospital staff working full-time in healthcare systems often struggle to pay for that same healthcare. These aren't anomalies. They are symptom signals of a middle class losing its purchasing power while the cost of participation rises all around it. In a healthy middle class, income and cost of living move together. In today's economy, they drift apart, and stability disappears in the space between them. There is a difference between living in an economy and surviving in one. Living means savings, time, mobility, and security. Surviving means bills, sacrifices, delays, and hoping nothing breaks. Many households transitioned from living to surviving without even noticing when it happened. Survival isn't stability. Survival is exhaustion. One definition of the middle class is optionality, the ability to choose where to live, what to buy, what to study, how to spend your time, and when to take risks. Optionality is freedom. When finances tighten, optionality collapses on with it. The middle class. The collapse can be summarized in one sentence. The cost of being middle class rose faster than the income needed to sustain it. Everything else is just detail. Income slow, costs fast, debt bridging the gap. No single ideology caused this. No single event triggered it. It was structural, a slow, cumulative shift that societies only notice when the stability is gone, and its consequences are everywhere. When the middle class shrinks, social trust declines. Political extremes rise. Mobility collapses. Families delay milestones. Cities change their demographics. Wealth concentrates, risk spreads downward. A society without a center is a society without an anchor. The signs appear across every major industry. Decades ago, a factory worker could buy the refrigerator they built with a month of income. Today, it requires 3 or 4 months. Food workers who feed millions often rely on the cheapest food options for themselves. Tech workers who assemble advanced devices cannot afford those same devices without credit. In the 1980s, middle-class families could purchase modest homes near major cities. Today, even dual-income households struggle to qualify for mortgages. Transit workers who keep cities moving often can't afford to live in them. Education, once a step upward, has become a financial burden that can consume a decade of income. Employees in telecommunications can't afford the plans they sell. Airline workers can't afford flights outside of internal discounts. And the builders of mobility automotive workers around the world often can't afford new vehicles themselves. The average worker today produces more value per hour than at any point in history, but that productivity returned to markets, not households. The system grew more efficient. The individual did not grow more resilient. When workers can no longer buy what they produce, the message is clear. The middle class is no longer part of the market, it is part of the machinery. Real collapse is not dramatic. It feels like working more for less, saving less every year. Higher bills, fewer choices, more uncertainty, slower progress. Collapse is when small things get harder and big things become impossible. It is not a moment. It is a direction. The middle class didn't collapse suddenly. It collapsed structurally through wages that slowed, costs that rose, and systems optimized for efficiency rather than stability. This isn't a story about decline. It is a story about design. Because when the incentives of an economy shift, the outcomes shift with them. So the question isn't why the middle class collapsed. The question is, what kind of economy are we building next, when the center can no longer hold? Thanks for watching. This conversation resonated with you? Consider subscribing for more analyses like this one.